Right now today, if you want to walk into a Radio Shack and buy a phone cable, you cannot, because Radio Shack is gone. Every single one of its 4,000 stores. And so is Toys R Us. And so is Sears. And so is Bed Bath & Beyond. And this did not happen slowly or quietly. This happened inside roughly 10 years. A full collapse of brands that tens of millions of Americans grew up visiting every single week. Go back to 2012. Radio Shack alone sits at 4,300 American locations. More storefronts than any of the others on this chart by a wide margin. Sears is at over 800 stores, Kmart at 840, Toys R Us at 840, JCPenney at just over 1,100, and Bed Bath & Beyond at 1,200, and still growing. Sears had been the largest retailer in America for most of the 20th century, a company older than the automobile. Radio Shack once told the world that 90% of Americans lived within a few minutes of one of its stores. Shopping at these places felt less like a choice and more like a ritual, something millions of families just did every single week. And nothing about 2012 suggested that was ever going to change. And then the chart starts moving. 2013, and Radio Shack is still the tallest bar at 4,400 locations. But behind the scenes, the company is losing $200 million a year just from its phone business. And the debts are piling up fast. By 2014, it starts quietly closing stores, dropping to roughly 4,100 locations as it tries to stop the bleeding. It does not work. In February of 2015, Radio Shack declares bankruptcy. And this is where the chart does something that makes you stop and stare. The bar falls from over 4,000 locations down to 1,700 almost overnight. Nearly 2,400 stores gone in a single move. In 2017, Radio Shack files for bankruptcy a second time and exits with 28 company-owned stores left in the entire country. Watch what happens to Bed Bath & Beyond during all of this. Because while everyone else is shrinking, Bed Bath & Beyond is actually growing, climbing past 1,500 stores by 2017 and becoming the new leader on the chart, which makes what comes later even more striking. Meanwhile, Toys R Us had held mostly steady around 800 stores since 2012, but it was carrying $5 billion in debt that private equity firms had loaded onto the company over a decade earlier. And in September of 2017, it files for bankruptcy. A poor holiday season seals the deal. And by March of 2018, the company announces it will close everything. All 800 stores gone by summer of 2018. That same fall, Sears Holdings files for bankruptcy, taking down both the Sears and Kmart brands at once. The company that once ran nearly 3,000 stores is down to a few hundred, and those few hundred continue closing every single year, with Sears reaching fewer than 80 stores and Kmart fewer than 70 by 2020. JCPenney files during the pandemic in 2020, closes around 240 stores, but somehow survives the most unlikely outcome in this entire chart. And then 2023, Bed Bath & Beyond, the one brand that had been growing while the others fell, files for bankruptcy in April and closes its last store by the end of July. But this is not really a story about stores. It is a story about how an entire country changed the way it spends money. And nobody asked for permission. These brands were where American life actually happened, where couples registered for wedding gifts, where parents bought school supplies, where a Saturday afternoon with your kids actually went somewhere. When they were healthy, they proved that showing up every day and giving people what they wanted at a fair price was enough to outlast almost anything. The problem is that someone else figured out how to do that everywhere, at any hour, with any product, for less, without needing a single parking lot. Amazon went from $61 billion in annual sales in 2012 to nearly $575 billion by 2023. And every bar on this chart that got shorter, that number got larger. JCPenney is still open, with around 650 stores, somehow surviving 2 bankruptcies and a pandemic. Sears has fewer than 10 stores. Kmart has 9. RadioShack is basically a website.
Toys R Us is a small corner inside Macy's stores. The brand survived, but the stores did not. And if you have a child who is 8 years old right now, they have probably never once walked into any of them.